starting to tape the event for making the event available later on. And I guess Jacob, the stage is yours, and I will be very curious to hear what you have to say. And welcome for Zoom, because that's the way to go. And I'm sure that Jacob will speak about that in a few minutes in his speech. With that said, I'm going to be muting myself and leave the floor up to you, Jacob. And again, thank you very much.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be with you. I also miss our time together in New York, and maybe this will be some new way to reconnect and stay in touch. And we shouldn't wait 20 years again, or was it 10? I don't know. Anyway, we don't have too much time, so a few things to suggest. First, those of you who are willing or not afraid of, just turn on the camera so I can see you a little bit and I see if you resonate with what I say or not. Not mandatory, of course. You can choose your own convenient way how to do it. We are a small group, so if you have something interesting to say, please feel free to burst in and unmute yourself, say something. We cannot be unmuted all, because then there will be feedback and noises, but we are not 100 people, so we should be able. I also opened the chat room on this screen, so if you have any comment, if you have any question, please feel free to write. I might not be able to notice everything, but it's also a very good way to communicate with everyone. For example, if you have any comment to say, instead of waiting until we can discuss it, you can just type it in the chat room, then everyone can see it, so it creates a more effective communication. In fact, I found Zoom more effective than a classroom in many cases and many angles. I have about 20 minutes to talk, and then I understand it is open for discussion. I'm flexible. I will fit to your preferences, and I'm interested to hear your views, because my topic is now it's about innovation in crisis. For some reason, the slides don't work. Okay. I hope you see the slides now. So the topic is in a very depressing moment, right? We have this COVID. I don't know exactly how the situation in France, but in Israel, we are starting the second wave, which looks much stronger than the first one. We might go back to lockdowns, maybe temporary, maybe local, but it's pretty depressing. And then I come up with this notion that, hey, but we still need, want, must, or perhaps even we would be better off if we innovate during these times. So the topic is innovation in times of crisis, not necessarily pandemics, but crisis. A little bit about my background. My research, despite the physics background, it was a joint program of physics and business school. So I'm a professor of marketing. I'm at IDC in Israel, and also I have a summer appointment in Columbia University as a physics scholar. So I split my time, 8 months here, 4 months there. And most of my research is about innovation and creativity. This specific book discusses the idea that creativity is it's a skill, it's not a trait. And the true creativity is inside rather than outside the box. In order to have be able to find creative ideas, really creative ideas, you have to dive into the situation, into the problem. And in fact, constraints, they unleash your imagination and they unleash your creativity better than open, outside the box and random search. The reason I elaborated, because it is somehow related to the topic of this meeting. The method, which is called also SIT, is spread all over the world. This is part of the clients. We consult to many, but I'm not a consultant. I'm a professor, and usually I give the talks and the education. I want to start with this hilarious song. We don't have time to play everything, but you can find it on Google, or if you want, I can send you the slides later. This professor, as many of us, was caught by surprise. He was forced to move to Zoom because it wasn't possible to teach in classroom. I'll play just a few seconds of it.
At first I was afraid, I was petrified, kept thinking I could never teach through Canvas all the time. But then I spent so many nights reading the health docs for so long, and I grew strong. I learned how to
it goes on. It's funny. I like it. And actually, Lauren, you just told me that you play the guitar and you play the song. So I'm waiting to hear your version on YouTube. Let's see. This guy has millions of downloads. Maybe you can beat it. But what he's discussing is the topic of survival mode. He wants to survive this crisis. And I want to show you an alternative, that actually a crisis can be a blessing in disguise. It's not just something that we have to pass, not something that we have to survive, but it could be an opportunity. More closer to what MLK used to say. He said that you need to fly, but if you cannot fly, then you have to walk. If you cannot walk, then crawl. If you cannot crawl, do whatever you can as long as you are moving forward. I want to say here, or to leave you with a thought, that a crisis is an opportunity not just to walk or crawl. You can run, you can fly, thanks to the crisis. It happens, and we actually also see already some things, some phenomena that happen. We work from the offices, and who says that after Corona leaves our life, hopefully for good, that we will not start to work from home more. We will change our habits, we will be much better remotely discussing, maybe we will be much more efficient. In fact, some companies even experience a boost, like the Zoom, for example. They didn't dream that they will have this opportunity, but for them, this was an opportunity. And if you think of this, there are a lot of new applications, how to work with the Zoom in order to make all the communication much better. The streaming industry that faced some threats, Netflix is now doing pretty well thanks to the Covid-19. So there are already some companies that experience benefits from that. Of course, for the majority, this is a crisis, and this is also dangerous. But what I want to argue is that if we escape from the surviving mode, we find these opportunities. And I want to adopt something closer to the Chinese form. If you look at the Chinese word for crisis, it consists of two words, of danger and opportunity. It reminds the yin and yang that things somehow, that's 2 hours talking about the yin and yang, but the point is that you cannot really separate between the yin and yang. These are two opposites that work together. True that in pandemic it looks more like this and not like classic Chinese yin and yang. We have the threat, but I want you to focus also, I hope you can see my mouse, also on this part. There is some beauty also in the crisis, and we need to find it. Now, maybe it sounds something poetic, so let's look at facts, data. This is not the first pandemic. Before that, in the beginning of the 2000 years, we had the SARS. SARS was a pandemic, although if you don't remember, it was lethal. It was much more dangerous for someone who was infected, but it wasn't that infective. So overall, SARS killed less than 10,000 people all over the world. But since it started in the Far East, then China and some other countries, they already practiced a very good size of lockdown, and they tried to contain this spread. Because it was so dangerous, so lethal, they had to control it, and they took control of it. What happened after was that the entire Chinese economy boosted up, and the reason was because the e-commerce and the online industry, they actually took over. And I want to tell you the story of one company. I'm not sure you know the name, so maybe I'll give you the name later. It's not important. They had 400 employees, and when there was the lockdown, they had to send everyone home. What they were doing, they were mediating between US companies and Chinese companies. So it was a B2B business. Once all the employees were sent home, they had to find what to do with them. So they decided to make their version to a B2C, like copying eBay. Okay, so actually I admitted you do know the company. The name of the company is Alibaba. Well, it's not the entire Alibaba. Alibaba is it's a combination of companies, but this is the larger in this organization, the larger company. Alibaba should thank SARS, because if there wasn't SARS, maybe Amazon didn't have this strong competitor as Alibaba. In fact, there are other companies like JD.com, which is also very strong, very large company with almost 2,000 employees. It was built through the SARS, because they learned how to use the electronic world, the e-commerce better, and they took over the market. The entire Chinese economy started to work on that, and they are more advanced than us in many things, like WeChat is very advanced, the payment system through WeChat, everything can be attributed back to that crisis of the SARS. So there are opportunities in crisis, and I'll show you a few more, but I want first to have some philosophical pause and explain what I think is going on. We are educated to believe that there are 3 times tenses in our life. We have past, from the past we move to the present, and from the present to the future. But if you think a little bit about the present doesn't exist. Philosophically, it doesn't exist because it's a tiny second. Maybe analogically consider a point in space or a center of the circle. The center is a point, but it doesn't exist. It has 0 width, 0 volume, yet it defines the entire circle. So the present is a point in time. It doesn't really exist. So there are 2 tenses only, the past and the future. And as a former president of Israel used to say, experts belong to the past. For the future, we need visionaries. It means that actually, that if you're an expert, you are pushed by the past. It doesn't mean that you don't have a future, but your background, your infrastructure, your mindful infrastructure belongs to the past. But if you want to think about the future, you need to be pulled by the future and not pushed by the past. It doesn't mean that you should let down your expertise. You cannot leave it behind. You need your expertise. But in order to move to the future, you have to forget the present. So if you are in a survival mode, you're thinking about the present. And in survival mode, you're thinking about something that doesn't exist, or you belong to the past. Every time that people think in survival, they don't think about the future. Now, I'm not arguing that you shouldn't leave the present. I'm not arguing that you shouldn't solve the problems. We still have people dying, so we need to take care of this. But if you want to think about the future, then you need to think big. Now, there are many definitions for crisis. The second one in the middle is my own. I invented it. Maybe it's not a correct one, but I see crisis as a threat, and it takes us by surprise. It is not expected, and because it is a threat, it pushes us to think on survival and become in a survival mode. But as I want to show, it is also an opportunity. If a crisis is global, it means that we can meet now on Zoom and discuss the effect of crisis because you suffer from the same problems and same threats that I do. Crisis doesn't have to be necessarily something bad. It doesn't have to be necessarily a pandemic or something physical. All these are victims of Amazon. For them, Amazon is crisis. True, Amazon is a blessing and it changed our life. It is changing the retail world. But for these specific companies, Amazon is a crisis. And if they think in survival mode, then they will live another day, another year. I had Macy's in one of my classes in Colombia in creativity, and they had a project. The project definition for the student was how to live side by Amazon. Maybe it's too late for them, maybe it's not, but this is a survival mode. But all these, if at the time before shutting down the business, if they could think of something beyond the future and beyond Amazon, maybe today we would see them and enjoy them. So let me classify the types of responses. I also mentioned that I already mentioned the surviving mode. What is the future? What is the blessing in disguise? So it has to be something bigger, something that you want to thank the crisis for coming in, something that pushes you to do something that you wouldn't do without the crisis. That's the opportunity. Without that, you should stay in a surviving mode. That reminds us, Martin Luther King. Let me give you a few examples from my own experience. I'm teaching, I'm a professor. So this is my good friend, Dan Ariely. And Dan Ariely is traveling all over the world. I guess you know him, he's very famous. And he's giving talks all over. Even for me, if he would give a talk without charging me, still it would be impossible to bring him for class. But we did on Zoom, because now he's free, everyone is free. So the crisis created an opportunity that I can bring important people. My current project is bringing Shaquille O'Neal to my class in Colombia. Shaquille O'Neal is very important for this specific topic that I want, or should I say Dr. Shaquille O'Neal? He has a PhD. So far, no success, but if I can bring him, it's only in these times. Another thing that we are considering to do is providing MBAs, the executive MBAs, classes after bedtime, because again, it's on Zoom. So who cares what about the classroom? If they're doing this at home after 10, it's much easier for them. Most of them are high-tech people, so because of the time differences, they're used to work in these hours. So it was my idea actually, and when I offered it, this was the face of the head of the MBA program. But after thinking about it, he actually liked it, and we are piloting this next semester. So if you want to look at the famous Booz-Allen map about the newness to the firm as a function of newness to the market, we can create a typology of responses. This one, if you see my mouse, type D, is something that not relevant, because in time of crisis, you don't have resources, so you're not supposed to invest much more. What you want to do is to enter the sweet spot revolution, meaning that you add a lot to the market without changing much your organization, without changing much your infrastructure, without paying too much. And that would be the real revolution, like they did in Alibaba, because they had the infrastructure. It was a very small shift, or maybe I would like to use something from the creativity part. It's a novel combination of existing concepts. You want to use your current concepts, but in a novel combination. There's also a principle of functions follow forms, which instead of explaining it, I want just to tell you that it is very close to what they're doing in the startup in the high-tech industry. They have this slogan, it's not a bug, it's a feature. When they have a bug, they're immediately looking for a way how to take advantage of this bug and offer value, because they already have it in the system. Instead of fixing it, maybe take advantage of it. So now, for the rest of the time, I want to quickly go over a few examples, and without even deciding what is the classification, let you classify them according to this chart, but also see what are the opportunities. Right now, Airbnb suffers from this crisis. People don't travel, and therefore they don't rent Airbnb apartments. And if you look at what they're doing, I'm not trying to mock them or to criticize them, but the ideas themselves are pretty pathetic. They cannot make people fly, so they don't have enough space to maneuver. But if you look at the history, at the recession in 2008, which was a crisis, this was the reason Airbnb exists, because at that time, the recession led people to think for cheaper solution, low-cost solution, and that let Airbnb grow because they used this crisis. So you see, now they suffer from the crisis, but the previous crisis created them. And because they didn't study yet all the components of the current crisis, maybe they are overlooking something, and maybe they can build another process of growth instead of these small changes. So in 2008, this is the takeoff of Airbnb. I'm not against small things. For example, this is my PhD student wife, Nati, and they decided actually now all the doctors are doing, because they wear all the masks and you cannot recognize them, so they put the picture with the details on the clothes. It's a small thing, it's nice, but you know what? After the COVID is gone, still doctors will wear masks in many spaces. And why not give the details or some story on the cloth about the doctor and create some more environmental and friendly communication with all the patients? So that these things are important. Also, when you start to innovate, you see that Apple is in the game of manufacturing masks or handles to open the door without hands, with the legs. That's important even when there is no COVID. It's better for the sanitation in hospitals. Even Cadbury is manufacturing masks. Instead of doing chocolate cookies, they're manufacturing masks. But if you look at the larger and more important scales, now there are new designs for the airplanes. And who says that we have to sit in the current design? There are better design now, thanks to this crisis, that we want to create more separation. Maybe they will be able to create much more comfortable, much more convenient sitting in the airplanes. Of course, it will take more space, and there's some cost-benefit calculation that everyone has to take into account, but it might trigger a process where the flights will be much better, or the capsule in the restaurants, or even the drive-in that as a retro is coming back to the United States in order to stay safe and not get infected. there are restaurants just use their garage, the parking, they play on the screen a video, and people come, stay in the car and dine. That's a unique solution to this situation, but it might stay also after the COVID, because the drive-in had some interesting benefits at the time, and maybe now families will go to drive-in, and it will be this retro. To conclude, I want to show you a lot of cases where firms created shift and pivots because they sense the crisis. And I hope that with these small cases, a list of cases, I can convince you that the crisis can be an opportunity, and it is our responsibility to open our minds. YouTube started as a dating site. And the reason they changed to YouTube is because at that time, people didn't like to post any stories or video clips on themselves, not like today, they're doing this all the time, but 2005, it was too difficult for them. So they did something completely different. Twitter, it was supposed to be a podcasting network. Because of a strong competition with Apple, with the iTunes, they understood that they have no business. So they switched and they became Twitter. Again, if there wasn't iTunes, maybe Twitter was a podcasting network, maybe even losing money. Shopify started as a snowboard company. They weren't able to sell it, so they created their own site, and from them, it was developed to Shopify. Pandora was a recommendation engine for consumers who come to a record store in order to play to buy a record. And then when the records and the DVDs and the CDs started to disappear, they understood that they have no business. So they responded, and they became one of the first internet radio. So it's completely different. And again, it's a response to a crisis. We see today the very different ways to approach the ventilation, the manufacture of ventilators, and the world will have much better and much cheaper ventilators. But in order to allow time for discussion, let me just use another final example of what happened to the cloud. The cloud is very important infrastructure. In fact, the main advantage of the cloud was that it allowed startup to start the business, start the development without the necessity to purchase a lot of computation power. That reduced the bar, and many companies could start. And since Israel is known for its startups, I know it for a fact that many companies weren't able to start if there wasn't the cloud service, because then they just paid for the computation and not for the infrastructure. So that pushed the entire startup industry in the world. As a result, also, we enjoy all the novelty and the progress in our life thanks to the cloud. And one of the dominant forces was Amazon, that launched their own cloud services, and we all should thank Amazon. But I don't know if many people know the story, why they did it. It's not part of the business. So I'll tell you what happened. What happened was that they had experienced a lot of shutdown around Christmas. Around Christmas, there were many invitations, many orders, and in fact, there was a joke that at Christmas, this is Amazon and not Amazon. And the computers were just shutting down all the time. In order to solve it, they had to purchase a lot of computation power. So they had a lot of computation there, but it was sitting for 300 days in a year, doing nothing. And they didn't know what to do with that. And then they decided, since we have this computation power, let's sell it over the year as a cloud services. So again, it's a local crisis, it's not a global crisis, but for them it was a crisis because it put into a risk the entire situation of Amazon because they couldn't provide service at the time. That solved their small issue, but also opened a lot of opportunities to other companies and to the entire industry. At Amazon, it's pretty common to do it. If you know the mechanical Turks, the panel that we are using, that's also the same principle of using a bug and make it a feature. They had this app. If you could enter the store and find a product that you like, you could take a picture of it, and immediately you will get a quote from Amazon and the link where you could buy it in Amazon. So people would come to the stores and buy in Amazon. The in time, they decided not to use it too much because they didn't want to damage the stores and open a war. But still, they had this app. The problem was that they couldn't find an AI solution to have a reliable identification of the product that people search for. And so they had to recruit a lot of people to be able to. This is what they call mechanical Turks. Mechanical Turk means when you use people in order to do a computer job. So they sent the link, and people were just looking at the products, and they found the right product, sent back the link, and then when it converged, the customer at the store received the quote and the link from Amazon. But then again, they had a lot of people sitting. So they decided to offer them a job, being a panel in market surveys and in experiments and stuff. This is now fundamental. There are many problems right now because of bots and everything, but it is a fundamental research tool. The two examples for Amazon are just, I'm wrapping up, is to explain that sometimes bugs can become features. Sometimes when you're doing something to solve a small problem, you actually can solve a big one. Sometimes when you have to survive, you can change something small in order to launch a new path, maybe even to greatness in the case of Alibaba. That's it for now, Laurent. I understand that we need to go back to panel in order to allow people to discuss it. So I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, but if indeed, thank you very much, Jacob. As Jacob highlighted, we're a small group. So first of all, thank you very much to Jacob for his presentation. And I see that there is a first question that came up from Raphael. But please feel free to get in, put the screen on, make the Zoom an opportunity to, as Jacob highlighted, to interact, make it the interaction even more human. So yes. Maybe.
So I read Raphael's question, but maybe you can, because we're a small group, you can just share with everyone, and then I'll respond, or anyone else.
Exactly. Raphael.
I cannot hear you, but I don't see that you are muted. So maybe there is some other bug. Turn it to a feature quickly.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, it's better. Thank you, Jacob, for your speech a few minutes ago. So I had a question regarding disruptive innovations. As you may know, in the past, most companies were innovating using Me Too strategies, copying what competitors did, which means that disruptive innovations were not so frequently implemented. So do you think that the drama caused by Covid-19 crisis might lead or force companies to innovate in a more disruptive way compared to the past?
Yes, first, let me just respond to the Me Too strategy. It is interesting, but the failure rates for Me Too products is about the same of the failure rates to the non-Me Too products. So the fact that different mechanisms of failure, but still they fail at about the same rate. So it's not a safer strategy than innovate by yourself, but it's a legitimate one though. It doesn't mean you have to innovate all the time. You should have a mixture. In my view, and again, this is my own subjective view, and I might be wrong, your intuition is as good as mine, maybe even better. I think that like previous crises, some of them I mentioned, we will see disruptive innovation soon. In fact, I would even like to argue that we already see some. Not surprisingly, it comes from opportunities and problems together. Right now, about 18% of the population suffer from depression. I said right now because unfortunately, my concern is that the COVID will increase these numbers. Even people who were not prone to depression, they will. I hope I'm wrong. There is a software that was developed for the cell phone in order to be able, by counting your steps, and there is another application that if you give permission to read the text, they can analyze if you are going to fall into an episodic of depression. Now, what they do, they send a message to your psychiatrist and to a designated friend or family member. So they can come over and help you either, well, they might, depending how what type of depression is it, but they might save you. They might save you hospitalization or, God forbid, committing suicide. But maybe this is just a depression that means that you just need to talk with someone, or just make sure that you increase the dosage of the pills that you need or whatever. But 18% is a lot. If 18% can get help, then it is important. Now, for me, it's interesting because we are getting closer to the days that the psychiatrist will prescribe not only a drug, but also an app. And I think we are getting closer to this time that the apps, thanks to the AI, thanks to the text analytics, thanks to the image processing, they will be able to support remote medicine. My guess is that after the COVID is gone, we will see a lot of remote medicine advantages. We already can do a lot of diagnostics through the cell phone. I've seen some doctors that are doing this. I know a psychiatrist that is doing all this treatment on Skype even before the COVID. So now I'm sure that all these patients are on Skype or Zoom. So I think we are facing a revolution in remote medicine, but maybe in other fields too. What do you think?
I agree with you.
Okay, let's see. I'm sorry for taking my eyes to the side, but the other screen is there. I think there are a lot of questions, so maybe let's take them by order. And Sophie, can you just share your question with everyone? Oh, it's a comment. It's not a question.
Yeah, it's a comment.
Yeah, actually, I agree. If you want to add, then just but I don't see the name. Maybe she left. Frederick?
Your sound, Frederick. Frederick?
Sorry.
I can answer if you want, but better everyone can hear you. It's better.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot again, Jacob, for being here today, and thanks, Laurent, for organizing this very interesting talk. Now, crisis. Okay, I get it that it's a source of opportunity. Okay, thanks. I work in digital, and we're running an app. And the question is, okay, should we be crisis ready? And is it about infrastructure or a state of mind, or being like mentally ready, or from a structural point of view? Thank you.
Okay, so this is a shorter version of this talk, so I didn't elaborate on something when I was in the philosophical pose, but your question brings me there. In principle, I could argue as a professor that, hey, you need to recalculate your path every now and then. You know what? Every month. You know what? Every week. Maybe every day. I can base it on statistics. We know that 70% of the successful startups are doing something completely different than the design at the beginning. So if you look at the business plan, look at what they are doing today, completely different. And this is 70% of the successful one. There is also one hypothesis that the unsuccessful ones are those that were not be able to be sufficiently flexible in order to make the switch. So these switches are important. So why crisis? We can do it continuously. And the answer is that we simply cannot. It's impossible to recalculate every day. You need to work with some plans. You need to, because it is not efficient. So, but crisis, you have to change. So I like your term of being ready mentally, because when there is a crisis, you need to change anyway. You need to recalculate anyway. So the only thing that you need to take into account is to remember that when you change, it is better, usually. So make sure that also this time it's better. And the only reason is because the effect of the crisis psychologically is it takes you back to the survival mode because you're under a threat. Yeah. But basically, every time that you're required to make a change, you can do it much better than if it wasn't. I'll give you an example. I have a student. Actually, this is the husband of the doctor that I showed you. He was supposed to go to a postdoc to Columbia, and he is submitting now his dissertation, and COVID-19 just changed everything. He cannot. So we built for him a new, he's staying here in Israel for his postdoc, but we built a relationship with his mentor and courses taking to the Zoom. And now he thinks that actually, thank God he stays in Israel, because he has a better program now. He will have better training than if he had go. Or for example, it's an app. Maybe actually, Frederick, maybe you can tell me better how to do it. But I wanted to develop an app for the corona, and the idea was that well, there are two features there. One feature is that every time you enter a coffee place or restaurant or whatever, you just grade them how well they are doing in terms of sanitation. If they have this alcohol, if they wash their hands there, if the tables are separated well enough. And so each coffee place, each bank, every establishment is getting graded on how safe it is. Now, this information is very important for the elders or for the sensitive people, so they can decide which coffee place they want to go. And if they cannot go there, then for the coffee places, it will be an incentive to improve their service in terms of the hygiene. The second feature is that it can give you real time, if you download this app, it can use the Bluetooth in order to measure the density, how crowded is a place. So again, if you are sensitive, or if you just want to avoid crowds like lines in the bank, then you can come in different hours, because right now it is too crowded for you. And we're too slow, and I don't think if we will be able to do it in a timely manner, because we're all volunteers in this. But the point is that even after the COVID is gone, there's still value for this app, right? Because flu kills more people than the COVID usually. Well, we don't know yet because COVID is not over. But at least for this winter, the people who died from COVID are not much more than seasonal flu. So this kind of app should be relevant in any winter, and for people who just want to avoid the crowds, like myself. So this kind of being mentally ready means that just avoid taking crisis as a negative situation for the future. It's a negative situation for the present, but the present doesn't exist philosophically. So just, if you want to think about the future, crisis is an opportunity.
Thanks a lot for sharing, and good luck for your app. Only one advice, just check that it hasn't been done before. Maybe some Indians or Chinese already developed this app.
I hope it is done, because they will be better and faster than me.
And that will improve the situation very, very, very fast, because people care. I think the real disruption in internet is the grading. I mean, the rating, sorry. So when you rate, people care. You see it in Asia. I mean, you see it everywhere. Once you start being rated by others and the community is getting bigger and bigger, you listen. And I like the principle, the first idea. About the Bluetooth thing, I mean, it's not to talk about that, but some countries don't use Bluetooth. So I don't know if you can scale it outside the US, but that's a very interesting idea. You should investigate further on that, for sure.
We'll do our best. We'll see. I'm pretty sure in innovation, you have to accept the fact that you are not the only smart. I don't know if I'm smart, but definitely I'm not the only one in the world. And I'm pretty sure that there are others working on similar apps. And the reason I'm speaking open when I can on this is to find someone who is already doing something and join forces to make it faster and better, because I'm not going to make money out of this. It's not the purpose.
That's a great idea. Just last point, and then I'll let the others ask the question. In Asia, where I come from, they say that if something is going well and smooth and all, it means you have a problem. So they're always prepared for crisis, and the fact that they're dealing with crisis local or global, so to speak, is fine. They are, again, mentally prepared for that. When everything is going smoothly, that's a problem. Something's going to happen that you're not ready for, and that's a interesting concept and state of mind.
I agree with it. Thanks. So who wants to be next? Yeah.
I'm the next, Jakob, and thank you very much for sharing your ideas, in particular about the application that you are talking about. We are calling that engaging social network. That means that's the type of scoring shared with everyone helps us, in fact, to share not only just security concerns, but also values. Good purpose, if you prefer. And in fact, I classified that and I studied engaging social network for 10 years. So I can provide you some advice if you want to get some ways to develop that and to develop also the community, because that's all based on developing the community, as Frederick talked about.
Mm-hmm.
My point and my question was more about we are trying into a VUCA world, a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. That means that crises will come every day or every month or every quarter, depending on the business. The problem is that most of the companies are not really organized to face and to really get innovation, or I would say new ideas or past ideas which would be applicable at that time during the crises. And for me, in fact, it's a main problem, which is about how can we bring and prepare the company to face crisis after crisis. Just to come back to after the very good feedback from Frederick, who said, you know, in Asian countries, they are always prepared for the next crisis. Could you elaborate a little bit about what you have seen in some of the companies that you talked about, how they are organizing to continuously bring those new ideas back to the top to help, in fact, to get the right pace of adopting those?
I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you a little bit, but I think companies are not preparing themselves. Mm-hmm. This is why I thought I should give these kind of talks in this specific time. I'm kicking myself a little bit for not spotting this earlier, because then I could start earlier with this kind of message. Companies are willing to be creative, definitely. They understand that innovation is a growth engine, and they're doing innovation and they invest in innovation. They're even willing to take risks, but they don't have this Chinese or Far East philosophy that if something works well, then it is a sign that something is wrong. They don't have it, and they don't have. Maybe it's good to see that people are optimistic and they believe that there will be no crisis, so they're not prepared for it. So the bottom line is that I think it is up to us, if we believe that this is the right philosophy or the right way to organize our companies or societies, that we should talk about it and share. Because I promise you there will be a crisis in a year or two, some kind of crisis, Amazon kind of crisis or flu. By the way, each winter we have a crisis with the flu. We just didn't think of this as a crisis, and we just didn't think that this could be an opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Jakob.
So, is this Virgin now?
Yes, Virginie. Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your presentation. I had a question, because we know at the moment and in crisis moment, usually there are a lot of things that are changing quite rapidly, and it's very difficult to anticipate them. So my question is how to find kind of a solid foundation to fuel innovation. Is there any trends or whatever? How would you suggest us to look at the world to find the solid points?
Not related to crisis, right? In general.
Yeah. But in crisis, probably it's very important to make sure that we rely on really solid foundation to fuel innovation.
Well, first, I think, Laurent, you also have something to say about this, right?
Yes, I may, but please go on.
So you feel free to jump in and add. I think we are already. I'm doing this almost 30 years. So I think I saw a changing trend. So today it's the stage where most companies, most managers, most societies, they understand that innovation is not just a cost, it's an investment, and it's imperative, that without it, we will not grow. So today, I don't think this is a culture problem. There is a way how to implement this culture. And there are a lot of myths about creativity. One of them already mentioned is that you need to think outside the box. Another myth, for example, is that brainstorming works. Brainstorming doesn't work. It's a different talk, but brainstorming will ensure that you'll have fewer ideas and they will be less creative rather than if you do not do brainstorming. What we're doing now, by the way, is not a brainstorming. It's a discussion, it's thinking, and it's working very well. Brainstorming just destroys creativity, and just I'll give you a hint how you should measure it. Don't compare one group to one person, because then the group will win even with brainstorming. But if you take 10 people who are doing brainstorming and 10 people who work separately in the rooms, then the 10 people that work separately will provide more ideas, there will be different ideas, and they will be more creative and even better, not only original, there will be more useful ideas. I gave it as an example that we have a lot of myths about creativity and about innovation developed mainly in the 70s. And despite the fact that there are a lot of evidence that they don't work well, they still, people are somehow under some fixedness, and they still work with old tools that are not updated. So I think the culture is already at the right stage, but the tools, people didn't upgrade. They're still using the versions at the 70s. You can tell something about incentivizing, Lauren, right? How to incentivize people to be more creative. Maybe before that, I'll just give you another thing. Some managers think that, okay, so we want creativity, let's take all the creative people and put them in one group. That will lead to chaos. There is a research that shows that if you want an effective group in creativity, you need to put 30% creative people, and 70% should be not creative.
Yeah.
Because they will have other skills. And without the 70%, the 30% cannot do anything, even in the thinking stage, let alone the implementation. So there are a lot of knowledge, tools, and procedures, but they still didn't diffuse into our life. It probably will take time, but Laurent, please add something.
I mean, I think, back to your point, thanks, Jacob, and thanks for the question, Virginie. I think the question is, there are a lot of tools available and new ways to relate to innovation and ideation. But as Jacob highlighted, I think the tools that are currently used are not the best ones to actually foster innovation, although companies may be not only mentally ready, but consider it as an investment. So I think it relates back to the processes and the way we go after things. And having worked in this field for some time now, not involved as much as I used to be, very frankly. What was quite depressing is the lack of abilities of claim for will to change and an ability to change in the way things are handled. And that starts with ideation, back to creativity, back to what Jacob said. To come up with new things, you do not necessarily need to only involve creative people only. There is a need for other type of people to be involved. You can accelerate the process of ideation as well with asynchronous systems available that the internet allows. But I think it's those type of new methods needs to be more used or better used. And I think fundamentally, I think companies lack of a process problem and then an ability to consider things differently. So that's the reason why I didn't interrupt before, but I think all the questions that we had relate to, it's one thing to be willing to be innovative. It's another to put things in motion and organize organization through processes to actually not only be willing to be innovative, but foster innovation. And that's the reason why, all the examples you gave, a lot of them are actually linked to companies that have this ability to shift very quickly, or to have an ability to, a very buzzword in the world we live in is agile companies or agile organizations. But yes, indeed, you need to be agile to actually get there. Very frankly, we've been laughing at the beginning of the talk with Jacob. We're all old chaps now, Jacob. So there are things that companies could do, that processes, methods available to do so, but they need to be willing to implement and change the way they relate to things. And I'm sure that one thing that I did a query, I did a simple query, simple survey on LinkedIn, probably 2 months ago, where I asked people, in a time of innovation, what is the first thing you actually do? Guess what was the answer? And there were 3 potential answers. I just continue what I've been doing, just trying to save what could be saved. I try to change the way I do things, leveraging what I'm good at, potentially doing other things. So that's the sweet spot that Jacob was mentioning too. And I don't remember what was the third option, but 70 to 80% of people said, yes, I'm going to be doing what I'm good at doing for years. But in this situation, not much chance to succeed. So it's not an answer, Virginie, sorry, but it's the fact to know that we need to be innovative is one thing. Having an ability to find the champions and to find the right processes to do so is the key. And that's it. And back to, I know that Jacob has been publishing on that many research available with facts and data. Doesn't mean that companies are embracing that, unfortunately. But that's the reason why maybe that may explain also, to some extent, I think one of the questions Raphael highlighted is why Israel is known as to be one of the most innovative countries, the startup nation. I think there are reasons that I explain that, but I'm sure Jacob, you can elaborate on that.
That's
Merci, Virginie.
That's yeah, thank you. That's you need about an hour to cover all the processes and the factors and everything, and I'm not sure it is. Not every process is interesting, so I'll just give you a few highlights about what we think stands behind it. The first thing is that Israel itself was a startup when it was founded about 70 years ago. There were no resources, no natural resources, outnumbered, and innovation had to be part of the surviving tool. So already in the independence world, there were innovations there, always working under constraints because lack of resources, not enough money, not enough budget, not enough infrastructure, always have to improvise. So it's something that was rooted in the culture that any situation can be addressed, any problem can be solved. Add to this some overly confidence, maybe in the genes, maybe because of the Middle East, we don't know, but people are not afraid to start trying to solve something and then fail, because there is no price for failure in Israel. You are allowed to fail. This is part of the culture.
Yeah.
If you have to report, you have to be honest about it. You have to say, I failed, and explain why did you fail. But no one is paying a price for failure unless it was being careless or unless not trying to solve a problem. You pay a price for not trying to confront things. This is part of the culture. The army itself, because the army is relatively small, it's not small, but relatively to the challenges, then they had to rely on technology and they had to develop the technology by themselves. So a lot of spillover from the army, especially in the cyber, went to the industry later. There is a mandatory service. So at age 18, they go to the army, then they have to learn technology because this is part of how the army operates. And also they learn about how to lead, how to be persistent, how to manage under crisis or under pressure, and at very young age. And then it's the other direction. Then you go to the university to study. And then when you graduate university, you are more mature and more prepared for startup life. Add to it this the fact that the whole society for 70 years is looking for innovation, so it's a very natural thing to do, try to become a startup. There were also some governmental encouraging steps in terms of taxes at mainly the 70s that allowed also a lot of attempts to try. There was a strong immigration from Russia in the 70s that combined to that. People, professors that came from Russia, and they had to clean, literally, some of them had to clean streets because they didn't have a job. So it's better to start something with innovation than to clean the street. So a lot of startups started then at the 70s. That's a brief. There are some others. It relates also to the fact that Israelis, maybe it's rooted in their religious, that because there is God and no one else can be compared to God, so it's a very flat hierarchy in Israel. You can tell your boss that he or she is wrong, and there is no problem with that. It's part of the communication. In fact, the communication, some people think that Israelis are rude. I'm not sure that they are rude. They are very direct, very sincere. So if you make a mistake in Israel, you feel like this is my job to tell you that this is a mistake. Because if I'm not doing this, then I'm impolite. It's now because we interact with other cultures, so we understand that we are not perceived as polite. So we try to hide this. But if you make a mistake, even the expression in English you would say, "I agree up to a point." In Hebrew, you say, "You are wrong." Now, because this is part of the culture, then saying that you are wrong is not perceived as impoliteness. It's perceived as directness, and it's mean that you are my friend because you are free to say that I'm wrong. If you don't tell me that I'm wrong, then you're not really my friend. And again, all these help to the startup, because if there is a mistake in startup, you need to quickly find it and prepare yourself to the next. And the fact that you had to improvise all the time in the army, again, lack of resources, then you are more susceptible to the idea of a bug can be a feature and not just a bug. So there are a lot of inventions in Israel that started like this, that bugs became features. That's in a nutshell. We can spend a lot of time. I think it's an interesting phenomenon. By the way, now there is a new change in this. The dream of Israeli was to build a startup and then to be bought by a US company and relocate to the States. That was and then US companies realized about 10 years ago that it's not the right model for them. The right model for them is to keep the inventors on the soil that they grew and send the managers from US that know how to manage, because Israeli, they don't know how to manage well for the long run. They are very good in startup, but then they're stuck. They need, not because of the money, they need the support, the advice, the experience, and the procedures work by the book. So they decided to send the managers to Israel instead of sending the Israelis to US. So right now it's even making this process even faster, and it's very healthy for the society in Israel. Instead of experiencing the brain drain, like people inventing something and then immigrate, then they stay here. So I hope that it will have good influence on the future. But basically, I think that it started with the fact that we had no natural resources, except 2 years ago, we discovered gas in very enormous amounts. So finally, we have some natural resource.
Okay.
Thank you for your answer.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. It's 10:02 on my clock. So if there are any other questions, or you want to be following up with Jacob, please feel free to do so. We could go hours and hours, I'm sure. And it's I learned something. Maybe I should. Maybe in my past life I was originally from Israel, Jacob, because usually I say and state what I mean, and sometimes doesn't work very well in the French culture.
I understand that French culture is not far away from this, right? You're also very direct and.
Yeah, but they're also very direct, but depends on. if you if you relate to an organization, sometimes the organizations do not really accept what you have to say. Specifically, if you link that back to innovation, you need to find your product champion. You need to find the organization that will accept that. You know, it's a whole story. So so culture is a big thing out of that, and probably. But if someone has an additional question or comment, please feel free to step in and ask. Merci, Xavier. But no, it was great. So thanks very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed the interaction. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks very much. I guess all the people, you know, as we said, it's not quantity that mattered, but quality. I think people stay till the end. Thanks very much for sharing thoughts, Jacob.
If there's any thought or question or something to share, Laurent has my details. It is on the first slide, the email. Feel free to reach out.
Feel free to reach out. Feel free to reach out to me. We will. I don't know when will be the next next webinar. Where, you know, because you know, today we were lucky enough to have a very engaged and decent group of people. But I said to Jacob, you know, people believe that now it's summertime, so I think it's time for vacation. So, but maybe I will hold one sometime in August, depending on what's going to be happening. But one thing for sure, Jacob, I have an idea that I've thought about, and I'm going to be reconnecting with you to disrupt something, education.
Sure. Now you got me curious.
With that said, merci beaucoup, Jacob. Thank you to everyone. It was really cool, and thanks for Jacob. You see the experience of Zoom to bring people in and ask people to actually put their video on and interact directly. So thanks again very much. I will plug myself in. You know, I'm just putting together a new website called laurentflores.com where the next webinars will be announced. There is something called a masterclass. So feel free to share that in your network. I don't care about myself, but when I have quality guests coming in, it's always better to have an audience for the guest that comes in. And so far as time goes by, you know, the quality of people invited goes on and on. So they deserve a quality audience. So thank you very much for you guys to have taken the time. And again, you know, stay in touch. And
stay safe and healthy.
There'll be when my daughter will have time, she will actually put the video editing on to actually make the replay available. I'll send that to all of you. Feel free to share that in your network. And again, feel free to step in if you want to be sharing thoughts, idea, talk, recommend people, collaboration and ability to work together and spend a good time is the key here. So thank you very much, everyone, and thanks. Merci beaucoup, Jacob.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jacob.
À bientôt.
Bye.
Merci beaucoup. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Jacob, you want to stay in?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
It's good that Zoom had 2 buttons because I pressed already leave and then it said it, so I didn't press send.
Yeah.